Welcome to the How to Buy or Sell a Business Successfully podcast. The concepts discussed in this podcast are for informational purposes only. No attorney-client relationship is intended or formed by this podcast. No legal advice is intended in the substance of this podcast. Feel free to check out our website, www.goforemanlaw.com. Enjoy the show and welcome your hosts, Jake Wayman and Sam Foreman. All right, welcome back to the Buy or Sell Successfully podcast. We're in the middle of a series of 12 episodes where we'll talk about how the deal process works. We really want to provide a good overview of how to build your team, how to budget for your deal, key deal terms, concepts, things that we think will be really useful for you having a successful deal process. Today, we're going to talk about how to build your deal team, focusing on when you should build your deal team, who you should have on your deal team, and how you should manage your deal team. But first, let's do some short introductions. Jake, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jake Wayman, and my wife and I are the proud owners of Orange Theory Fitness here in Wichita, and also very active in the community. I've done a lot of work with some entrepreneurs in town, and I'm very active in the nonprofit space. In addition to all that, I got two beautiful boys, and also serve as an employee benefits consultant for Hub. And what I do in a nutshell is I help companies find the best insurance for their employees.
That's great. That's great. My name is Sam Foreman. I am a business attorney here in Wichita, Kansas, and have been married to my wife, Meg, for almost 10 years. We have two wonderful boys. They're constantly finding creative ways to redecorate our home and hide important electronic devices, which is always an exciting scavenger hunt at our house. And I'm an avid sports fan and currently pursuing a health journey to recover from starting a business right before COVID, which is the excuse I'm sticking to for now. Today, we really want to talk about, as I mentioned, building your deal team and hitting those 3 points, when you should build your deal team, who you should have on it, and how you should manage your deal team. Jake, why don't you talk a little bit about your process and when you started building your deal team?
When you want to build your team early. Your deal team needs to be thought of, when you're starting to search for that deal or wanting to buy a business, you need to realize, who do I need to have on my team? Because you can't do it all, nor should you try to do it all, because you will not get that deal if you decide to do it all by yourself. So I think it's, looking at that and actually putting it down on paper on who needs to be on your deal team. So if you are a person who doesn't have, the luxury of having $1 million to go buy a business, you're going to probably need investors. You're going to need some partners. So identifying some possibilities there. I think one important piece is the support of your family. If they're not on your deal team, then that is not going to be a great deal to go a part of. And so, you could go down a list of what you need to look for is from your accountant to your attorney to your banker. I think my first meeting actually was with Sam as my attorney to say, hey, I'm looking at doing this deal, because he really helped guide me through who I need to have on my deal team. What do I need to be doing? What do I need to be thinking about? Because, he's done this a time or two. And, when it comes to the legal side of buying a business, there's a lot of hoops to jump through and making sure that you're going about it the right way. But, I would say start early and, understand what you want in a deal team. What type of people do you want there? Not only just from their knowledge, but also who they are as a person.
No, I think that's great. And I think the earlier you start building your deal team, the better your deal team is going to be, because you'll have more margin, you'll have more space to really take your time to figure out who needs to be on your team. It's really difficult to build a team when the game has already started. And there's inevitably, there can be some of that going on. But if you have it lined up in advance before things really become time sensitive, it'll help you out a great deal. So I think, going back to our discussion of timing, the deal process, that initial phase can take 3 months or so. Early on in that process, you want to be thinking about who should be on your deal team, having some of those initial conversations. Take a couple of attorneys out for coffee, as long as they're all from my firm. Take out a couple of people, just try it on, see who you think is going to have a great relationship, provide great service and a wonderful experience for you on your deal team, who lines up with your values, your vision, who's going to be available for your deal. all
Yeah.
of those things,
Yeah.
and do it early.
Yeah, I mean, and kind of back on an earlier point of say you're going to need to find investors. I mean, those essentially are co-owners of your business. They're ones that are
Yep.
going to be active in your business. They may be a passive investor, but they're still part of your business.
Right.
They still have a say in what happens in your business. And so you all need to be on the same page for what is the goal for this organization when you
Absolutely.
buy it and where
Yeah.
you're going with it. And then kind of in that vein of finances is if you're going to have to go through a banker to get investment or to get a financing for your deal. I mean, that's got to be a very good relationship because, I think Sam mentioned this before is, if a bank's investing or financing the business, they're essentially an investor in the business too as well. So
Right.
they want that to go well. So that needs to be a good relationship too, because you're going to be working with them constantly if you're going to need additional funding or you're going to need, a line of credit or you're going to need lots of different things for the functioning of your business. I mean, those are key pieces. And I mean, another one is your accountant. I mean, it just goes into back one after another because if you have a good relationship with your accountant, you'll be able to have a conversation if you have a tax question or if something comes up that you have a question on, hey, what do I need to do here when it comes to my taxes? What's the best way to do it? I mean, really it boils down to on your deals team is relational capital. I mean, having good relationships with everybody on your deal team because when you need them the most, you want them to pick up that phone.
Yeah, no, and that's a great segue into talking about who you need on your deal team. And you've hit on a couple of folks already. The banker, the accountant, the lawyer. Those are critical pieces on a good deal team. I think one of the greatest things that people need to understand is that you are on your deal team. I know that that's kind of obvious, but it's important to understand that you have a role to play on your deal team and that you have a critical role. And your job is to make sure everybody else understands what their role is, what your objectives are, what game are we playing, what is success and how is it defined? Because ultimately it's your story that we're helping fulfill here.
Yeah. I mean, and you have to remember is like, you're the one who started this process.
Right.
And so like you want to be, and not necessarily control's a bad way, but you want to be the person who's leading this group.
Right.
And you want to be seen as that leader amongst the deal team.
Right. And that'll serve you well if you're on the buy side, especially as you go into running your business on the other side. Your family is a critical part of the deal team. This is a thought that's gelled for me over the last the last year or so is that, we don't live in a vacuum. And it's critical that we have that support at home for people to be healthy, to be well during the process, which is going to optimize their decision making and preparing them for success on the other side of the deal as well. And so making sure that there's early stage communication with your family about here's what the deal process is going to be like. Here's what I need from you. I need you to take on a little bit more responsibility here, or, we need to make these other adjustments at home so that the things that really matter at the end of the day are well positioned for success.
Yeah, and don't discount that family aspect. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, is family always comes first because, they sometimes get the scraps when you're doing a deal because at the very end of it, you spent so much time and energy on this deal that you forget about them. Yeah. And, they need to be probably, first and foremost the people you talk to when you're first starting this process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And setting those expectations, whether it's on the buy side or the sell side. Often on the sell side, the seller is going to work for the buyer. And so the busyness doesn't stop at closing. And so it's not an immediate gear shift back to a high amount of family time unless there's a lot of intentionality there. You mentioned earlier co-owners. I mean, critical part of the deal team. A really good investment banker or broker can be a tremendous value add to a deal team. Whether it's finding a deal, finding a seller, finding a buyer, helping you really understand what are market terms for this deal. Really good folks in that role can really add a lot of value to the team. And you need to talk to a couple of them. Make sure that they're a really good fit for what you're doing. We talked about bankers, accountants. Make sure that your accountant, there's a lot of family CPAs who do a wonderful job on personal returns who may not be prepared for a deal process. And making sure that you ask questions and give people the freedom to really tell you, hey, thanks for letting me do your personal taxes. I want to continue to do that. Let me make an introduction for you on someone who knows a lot about, the specifics of tax on on the purchase or sale of a business. because that person can, worth their weight in gold. If things are structured well.
Well, and I think that's a great point because, when we were identifying an accountant, we actually went to one that works with a lot of Orange Theories. They understand the industry. They understand the business. They understand what the franchisor looks like. They understand what, owners need to look at. So that was a good move on our part to separate our personal accountant from our business accountant.
Yeah. And you probably didn't pick them because they were the cheapest. There's an old saying that, if you want an expensive lawyer, go find a cheap one, or same for an accountant. Focusing on, as using your example, which I think is an excellent one, somebody who has a lot of experience, a lot of understanding of that particular type of business, because they're going to deliver a lot of value for you. Yep. They know how it works. They know what the franchisor wants. They know how it needs to look. It's not the first time they've seen those things. And that I think is a tremendous value add. Insurance. I mean, you know a lot about insurance.
Yeah.
But making sure that, you're prepared to make sure that your entity is properly insured, or if you're on the sell side, that you're thinking about what risks are going to survive after closing, and that you've got policies in place to take care of those risks, and that you've planned to have those conversations far enough in advance to get advice that you can do something with.
Well, and kind of on that is the agency you're working with. Make sure you have a great relationship with that agency, with the point of contact there, because that's one that you'll need to be in touch with, let him know what's going on, with your buying or your selling, and making sure that they are they're savvy in your industry. They know what needs to be done, what needs to be covered, because there are certain limits, like looking at your leases, there's certain things that you need to have covered. In a franchise agreement, there's certain things that need to be covered. I mean, it's knowing that you are in a good place and protected if certain things happen.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And then don't forget your financial advisor. We don't exist in a vacuum on these deals. If you're on the buy side or if you're on the sell side, there's relevant things happening on these deal processes that you want to make sure is taken into account as you prioritize, your own family plan and your financial plan. So have those conversations early so that if there's something to think about, to plan for, they're well prepared to do it in a timely fashion for you. A lot of folks will pull some money out of retirement or otherwise to get some additional liquidity to make these deals work and work really well for them. And there can sometimes be some advantageous planning that can happen, in connection with that kind of an advisor. And then last, and we've saved them for last on purpose because they are the lowest on the list, is lawyers. They're just the worst. Make sure you have a good attorney on your team who knows what they're doing. We always love doing deals when we're dealing with folks that really know what they're doing, who are running a good process on the other side. It creates value for the buyer and the seller. It makes for great experiences for our clients and for the folks on the other side of the table. And when the other team has really good legal representation, it gets really difficult whenever we've got somebody where we know this deal is not important to their legal team. We run into that frequently, and it's just, it steals money from my clients and it makes me mad. And there you go. So we've talked about who you need on your deal team. Quick recap. You need to be on your deal team. An active part, you need to lead your team. You need your family bought in on the process. They're a part of your team as well. Co-owners, investment banker or broker, your banker, if you've got a lending component involved, you need a good tax advisor, insurance advisor, your financial planner, and then a lawyer. And then, think about have an other category on that list as well. Who else do you need on your team? Because there's always somebody else that you need on your team, whether it's a subject matter expert or otherwise. And lastly, we're going to talk about how should you manage your deal team. Jake, what did you find most effective when you were managing your team when you were buying the Orange Theory franchises?
I think for us, it was, I set the expectation early that I was going to over communicate, I was going to make sure that there was going to be communication through the process and everything. And, as that leader of the deal team, they knew that expectation. And, you set it up ahead of time that, hey, this is going to be a good fluid relationship between all of us, because if you don't set an expectation early, then you're just going to have a lot of issues on the back end of it. I think it's, as a leader, you're the one who's picking your deal team. So you need to be the one asking questions. You need the one who's picking the folks on that team and making sure that the right fit for it, asking questions that aren't impacting what happens tomorrow, but what's going to be impacting 5 years from now, or even a year from now, just knowing that like, hey, where are we going? And are you going to be the right person on this deal team at that point in time too?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Well, thank you all for joining us for this episode as we talked about how do you build your deal team. We talked about, how to build the team, who do you need on your team, and then how do you manage your team? Ask lots of questions, set good expectations. I think my number one thought for this, my number one takeaway is start early on building your team. You really need to make sure that you've got enough time to make sure you've got the right team in place. Yeah, I think that's my number one thought. How about you, Jake?
Mine is everybody in your deal team is important. There's not one person that's better than the other. Every one of them serve a purpose. Everyone has a role, and every one of them is important in the process, not only during the deal, but after the deal as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I think my top wellness tip for today is to really make sure that you have set good expectations with your family when you're doing a deal process. If those family relationships, if things are good at home, things are frequently going a lot better in the deal process, and it shows that it makes a difference for everybody. And so, setting good expectations and planning for success on that front is critical. Thank you again for joining us. Next time, we'll talk about how much work will it take to get your deal done? Spoiler alert, it's a lot of work. Thank you all and have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us today. For future episodes, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And please check out our website at www.goforemanlaw.com/learning.